Okay, we are toward the bottom of Chaf Hey Amud Aleph 25a. We established yesterday that a husband may drop the charges if a husband warns his wife against secluding herself with another man. And we learned that he can take that back, undo it. This came to us via Zeira, who brought us a message from Jerusalem about 3 such scenarios in which the charges can be dropped. And we, or the scholars in the South, who is our final ruling, they accepted 2 of the 3, rejected 1 of them. The rebellious elder, they rejected that one. They felt that one, you cannot drop the charges because it's a matter of communal affairs. It's a public concern, public safety. But in the case of the husband and the wife, it's been established now that he can take back the warning.
The other one was the rebellious son.
The other one was a rebellious son, where also the parents can take back the charges. Yeah. So now the Gemara is going to discuss up until which point can he take back the warning?
Right.
Up until which point? At what point is it too late? And now the court is in charge and he can no longer take it back. That's the question right now. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Pligiba, this question is disputed between Rav Acha and Ravina. Rav Acha and Ravina. The Gemara doesn't tell us who said what, but just that these 2 sages were discussing this question. Up until which point can he take back the warning? Chad Amar, one of the 2, between Rav Acha and Ravina, said, Koidem stira machal. Before she secludes herself, he can take it back. Meaning, presumably this is what stands at the foundation of this argument. Up until the point of her seclusion, it's a question of his suspicion. He is suspect, or he's jealous of her relationship with a particular person, so he warns her. No action has been taken by her or by anybody to violate that warning. It's only a question of something that's in his own head. He's jealous and therefore issued a warning. So because it's before her secluding herself in violation of that warning, therefore he can take it back. This is one view. And therefore, la'achar stira, in this view, if after they've already secluded, so he warns her, she secludes herself, he takes it back. At this point, this sage would argue, Eine machal, the charges are not dropped, the warning is not taken back. And presumably the reason is because an action has been taken. And not just an action has been taken, but now there's a suspicion of infidelity. And once there's infidelity, then definitely the law comes in. Once there's infidelity, then the law itself takes over. And I don't want to say obligates, but the law itself certainly expects a separation. So now here, where she secluded herself after a warning, there isn't direct infidelity, but there's certainly suspicious infidelity, suspect infidelity. And because there's a suspect of a violation that the law would kick in, this argument with this sage would say, warning cannot be retracted. Because now there's already been a legal action taken. An action that at least suspects that the law ought to take over. So if before she secludes, then he can take it back because it's just a question of his jealousy in his head. But once she's actually secluded herself and there's suspicion of infidelity, now the law takes over and the warning cannot be retracted. That's one view. But the Chad Amar, the other one said, la'achar stira, even after her seclusion, nami machal, he can still take back the warning. And presumably, the reason for that is because there's no proof of infidelity. There's only suspicion of infidelity. To make the point even more, let's just say he didn't warn her. Hypothetical, he didn't warn her. He never issued a warning. And she secluded herself with someone. It could be a suspicious activity, maybe, and probably it was inappropriate for her to seclude herself with some other guy. But does that grounds for the law to step in and say, hey, there's suspicious infidelity, you guys should divorce? No, it's only his warning coupled with her seclusion. That's what makes the law step in. If that's the case, it still all comes down to what's in his head. Is he so jealous to the point that he's warning her? If that's the case, then he can take it back because the whole thing is predicated on his jealousy and his warning. That's this view.
Because this view is saying you need proof.
This view is saying until there's actual infidelity, there's no reason for the law to step in. It's all a question of his jealousy and his issuing the warning. And then if we can take it back, I'm just giving you both sides of the argument, right? Whereas the other view says, no, once she takes an action to violate the vow, to violate the warning, and she's suspected of infidelity, so there's already an action been taken that requires the law to step in, and therefore he can no longer take back the warning. Before she secludes herself, when it's only a question of his jealousy, then he can take back the warning. These are the two views. So the Gemara says, the Gemara takes Robert's side. Mistabra, and it would seem, says the Gemara, command Amar, that we should follow the view that says, Eine Machal, that once seclusion is done, no taking back the warning. The warning can only be retracted prior to her secluding herself, prior to her suspicious activity. So the Gemara sides with Robert's view. But of course, the way the Gemara operates is by trying to find a source that would support them, right? Says the Gemara this. Mimai, from where do we derive that it makes more sense, it seems more correct to say that once she's secluded, there's no more retracting the warning? Says the Gemara, Mahadri Rabbanan Rabbi Yossi, based on the response of the sages to Rabbi Yossi. So let's see, the Gemara is going to tell us a conversation between Rabbi Yossi and the sages being in the plural, and therefore what the sages would say, they're the majority, the law would follow their view. And if we can imply from that which the sages responded to Rabbi Yossi, that once the seclusion happens, there's no more retracting the warning, if we can imply that from the words of the sages, then that would be the law, because the sages are the plural. So let's see the conversation. Yeah.
I want to ask him, was Rabbi Yossi on the other side of the opinion, and the sages are trying to?
Well, let's see the conversation. They don't explicitly, Rabbi Yossi and the sages do not explicitly talk about the question of whether he can retract the warning, but based on their argument, we can deduce what they would have said about the timing of when they can retract the warning. And if we can deduce that the sages are on the side that once seclusion happens, there's no more retracting the warning, that would be the law because they are the majority.
Right.
So let's look at the conversation about a related law and see if we can deduce from there that they would have a similar discussion about when the warning can be retracted. So let's see their discussion. The Tanya, for we learned. Here's the conversation. The sages, Rabbi Yossi and the sages are discussing whether or not the husband is to be trusted alone with his wife after she's been warned and after she's been secluded, right? And she's going up, or she's ought to be taken up to the temple to drink the Sotah waters. She be trusted alone. Essentially, they're coming down to the argument. They're coming out to the discussion. I just want to double check this. They're basically coming down to arguing as to whether or not they need to send scholars to accompany them. Right? We already established that we have to send scholars to accompany the couple as they go up to Jerusalem. Yeah, that's the discussion. Right? We already established that we have to send a pair of scholars to accompany the couple up to Jerusalem because we're worried that they might engage intimately on the way, and they're really not supposed to. That's what we established, but that's only based on the opinion of the sages. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. So the discussion between now the sages and Rabbi Yossi is surrounding this question.
So the sages are saying you need accompanying witnesses, but you
need accompanying scholars to make sure that they don't engage intimately on the way. Which is what we already learned.
Yeah.
But Rabbi Yossi disagrees with that, and we're going to see how they argue about it. And based on the way they argue about it, we can derive what they would have said about the question of retracting a warning. So let's see.
I just wanted to say that isn't Rabbi Yossi's, most of his rulings are halacha, right? And when he's arguing with a singular.
Rabbi Yossi? I don't remember.
Singular
I
sage,
don't know.
his opinion is usually taken.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with those rules. I don't know. So Rabbi Yossi says, Baila Nemon Allah. The husband is believed, he's trusted to not do anything with her. And we don't need to send scholars to accompany them on their journey to Jerusalem because he's trusted not to engage with her. How is that? Mikal v'chaymer. This is done by an A for to your eye. How much to the more so? Namely, uman nida, when it comes to a woman who's menstruated and hasn't gone to mikveh yet. So at this point, it's forbidden for husband and wife to have relations from the moment she begins menstruating until she goes to the mikveh, until the 7 days and the whole business.
Right.
So during that time, before she goes to the mikveh, shehi b'kodesh, if he were to be intimate with her, that intimacy is a violation of such that he would be liable for kodesh, excision. Excision means literally death by the hands of heaven. It's the highest form of punishment that Torah has to offer, greater than capital punishment in a court. Because excision not only has cutting off of the death by the hands of heaven, but even has a question of a certain disconnect of the soul. The soul is even in some way disconnected. So it's a very, very deep, consequence, indicating a very grave sin. So for husband and wife to engage intimately before she's gone to mikveh is a very serious sin. And yet, by law, nemon Allah, we trust the husband not to do anything. It's not as if every time a woman menstruates, we have to hire 2 scholars to live in the house to make sure the husband and wife aren't intimate. We trust them, they're not going to do anything until she goes to mikveh. So if, says Rabbi Yossi, we trust a husband and wife not to engage intimately when there is the possible consequence of excision, so Sotah, how the more so, him engaging with her after she's been designated as a Sotah, while she's on the way to Jerusalem to drink the water, she belav. Where here, if they were to engage intimately, it would not be such a grave sin as excision. It would just be the violation of a prohibition. I shouldn't use the word just, but it's a violation of a prohibition, but not as severe as excision as it would be if a husband and wife were intimate before she's mikveh. So like Kol Shekain, is it not more so that we should trust him? If we trust the husband not to engage intimately with his wife when there's a question of this grave sin of excision, so when there's a lesser sin, certainly we can trust him. This is the argument. Sorry? No, the meaning is like this. No, the point is like this. Do we trust him to be able to contain himself? If he can't contain himself, then at the gravest sin, we should have people to block him from giving in. But the point is, we trust that people can control themselves for a little while. Good, so let him control himself here too. He can control himself until he gets to Jerusalem and she drinks the water. He can do it, it's fine. If he can hold himself back when he's with his wife before she's gone to mikveh, even though the risk of him doing it is a grave sin, and we don't have to impose some sort of, put the guards in his house to make sure he's not with his wife. He can control himself for a couple of weeks. Good. So he can control himself now until he gets to Jerusalem. That's Rabbi Yossi's argument, especially since the sin is of a lesser nature. And we're not so, especially reverse that. Especially even though the sin of him being with his wife before she's gone to mikveh is of such a grave nature, we still say, okay, he's fine, he can hold himself in. And we don't put people there to stop him. Yeah. This is Rabbi Yossi's argument. Okay, but now the sages respond. And based on the sages' response, we're going to deduce what they would have held on the question of the retraction in the morning. Amrullah, the sages said back to Rabbi Yossi an argument that's similar to yours, Robert. Not exactly, but similar. They said to him, no, you got this backwards. Im amris benida, when it comes to the question of a wife who's menstruating before she's gone to mikveh, it's a very grave sin for him to be with her, but we trust him. We don't have to impose scholars to watch out to make sure he's not with her. Why? Sheken yesh la heter, because he knows in 2 weeks from now I could be with her, and that's part of the point. It builds up anticipation, right? It's like a new honeymoon every month. They can't be with each other. They can't. They can't touch each other, and so on and so forth. And he's looking forward to her coming home from the mikveh. So it's not the fact that he can contain himself is because he knows in 2 weeks from now he can be with her. And therefore, Talmud Sotah, you cannot apply the same logic to a husband and wife traveling to Jerusalem to drink the Sotah waters. She'ein la heter, because he doesn't see a way out. It's, he's looking at his wife and he's thinking, this could be the last time I'm ever with her. This could be it. And therefore, even though it's a lesser sin, we have to send people to watch out, because in his mind, he might be like, this is the last opportunity I ever have. And therefore, you can't compare the two. And therefore, when it comes to a husband and wife sitting at home, there's no reason for us to, send guards to make sure they're not doing anything, because this is how relationships are. They separate for 2 weeks, they build up anticipation, he's looking forward, and they come back. But over here, this is a very strange circumstance. They're traveling to Jerusalem under these very suspicious terms. And he's thinking, he's obviously in a confused state too. His wife may have cheated on her, maybe not. Maybe this is my last chance to ever be with her again. I mean, this is, right. And therefore, we have to send scholars to make sure that they don't violate the terms of the Sotah proceeding. So this is the end of the discussion. So now let's try to deduce from what the sages said. Let's try to deduce from there what they would have said with respect to the question of retract. If you're going to say that even after she secludes herself, he may retract the warning, then then actually he does have the opportunity to be with her. If they're traveling together, right? They're going to Jerusalem. The sages say the reason why we suspect he might be intimate is because in his mind, this might be the last opportunity I ever have. If he's capable of forgiving the warning, then this is not the last opportunity. He can on the spot take back the warning and be with her. The foundation of the sages' argument is based on the fact that it's locked and set in stone that they can never be together again. If he can take back the warning, then it's not set in stone they can never be together again. He can undo the whole thing at any moment, which would mean he could contain himself, because he knows in the back of his head that whenever I want, I can undo it and be with her. So he's not so overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, this might be the last opportunity. And no, if I want to, I can take her just by forgiving her, going to therapy, maybe. The Gemara doesn't say that, I'm throwing that in there, but maybe you have to go to therapy considering their suspicion. But it's not the end of the line. The whole sage's argument for why they have to put the sages there is because this is the end of the line. And he's going crazy. Oh my gosh, this could be the last opportunity to ever be with her. But if he can take back the warning even after they're secluded, then this is not the end of the line. He can take back the warning and be with her. So from the manner in which the sages responded, it implies that this is the end of the line, and therefore it would seem that the sages are of the view that he cannot take back the warning. The Gemara says that if you're of the view that he can take back the warning even after seclusion, there is the possibility that he can't be with her. This is not the end of the line. Because if he wants to, he can forgive the warning, to his jealousy and warning, and then he can be with her. And the argument of the sages was built on the fact that this is the end of the line. He's thinking to himself, I can never be with her again. Which means there's no way out. And therefore he cannot protect the warning. And therefore, and that's why that's right. And that's why he would attempt. That's right. And exactly. The sage's argument is that precisely because he has no way out, because it's locked, that's why this is the way it works. The Gemara says elsewhere, Mayim genuvim yumtaku. Stolen waters are sweeter. The Gemara quotes a verse, because when you can't have something, that's when you start to really want it.
People on diets.
Right? When you can't have something, that's when you all of a sudden start wanting it. So this is when it comes to, especially when it comes to the issue of women, right? So in his mind, I can never be with her again. And this is making him more crazy. He really wants to be with her because this might never happen again. And that's the whole argument of the sages for why we have to send these scholars. But if he has a way out by just forgiving her, then it doesn't, then the whole psychological game of, oh my gosh, this may be the last time, falls away if he has the easy way out.
That I can see.
Yeah.
About the reward and punishment is a harder argument to.
Yeah. Okay.
Rabbi sees,
Yeah. So Elash Mamina, therefore we can derive from here that once she secludes herself, there's no way out, and he can no longer take back the warning. And the proof from the fact that the sages refer to this as the end of the line, which is why he might be going crazy and really want to be with her, which is why we're sending the sages, because it's the end of the line, thus indicating that once she's secluded, he cannot take back the warning. Shema Mina, the Gemara concludes, indeed, from here is proof positive that that's the law. So in summary, we learned that yes, husband can drop the charges if he's suspicious of his wife, but that is only true if the entirety of the foundation of the charges are based on his jealousy. Once the charges cross over into her suspected activity, now the law says, one second, the suspected activity, we have to step in and deal with it. And then the Sotah law takes over, he can no longer retract. Right? So if we're going to continue our discussion from yesterday, let's follow the line of reasoning. Yesterday, we established that when the charges are a question of public concern, you cannot take back the charges because it's a question of public concern. Now we're adding a new layer. If the issue is you, that's the whole beginning and end of the story, then you can take it back. But once we're talking about someone else's behavior, someone else's immoral behavior doesn't stop being immoral just because you decided you don't care. Let's say, for example, in modern, I don't know what modern civil law is. But say in modern civil law, when one person hits another, right? The charges can be dropped in theory, let's say. I press charges and I can drop charges. There's no witnesses, let's say. But in Torah law, the immoral behavior of the perpetrator doesn't go away just because the defendant doesn't care anymore. You still behaved immorally. Right? So that would be the argument here. Even though, so if it's only a question of my jealousy, okay, so you drop the charges, you drop the charges. But once there's a question of her suspected immorality, then whether you care or not becomes irrelevant. She behaved immorally, and the law has to deal with that. That's perhaps the line here we're being drawn, maybe. But before you say it, I'm saying maybe because we have to go through all the laws of Torah and see if this is the case. Go through all of Torah law and see if that's the case, that when there's a perpetrator who behaved immorally, can the charges be dropped? And if my argument is right, then it should be universal, right? So I don't know if we're 100% sure that it's universal, but in this case, it would seem to be correct. What do you say?
Yeah, in a civil case, it's the parties are private party versus private party.
Yeah.
In a criminal case, it's the people of the state of whomever
Right.
versus
there you go.
criminal party. So
That's a good point. It's the people, the state of whatever against so-and-so, as opposed to so-and-so against so-and-so. Yeah.
Decision whether they want to prosecute or not
That's right.
not the aggrieved party.
That's right. So if the state as a whole believes that this behavior was criminal or immoral, it doesn't matter if you drop charges or not. This was a criminal activity. Right.
But it's not the sole decision making.
That's right.
The prosecutor.
So the same thing would be over here. If Torah says this is an immoral behavior, irrespective of your suspicion, then whether you drop charges or not is irrelevant.
Right.
The case goes forward.
Right.
And that must be what's happening here.
Yeah.
If she didn't seclude herself and it's purely his suspicion, okay, your suspicion comes, your suspicion goes. But once she behaved immorally, then the Torah says, okay, you don't care anymore, good, but she still behaved immorally.
It's the fabric of society that may be affected.
It's the fabric of Torah law that's affected.
Well,
because Torah law is beyond
protecting the fabric of society.
Civil law protects the fabric of society. Torah law protects the fabric of society and is engaged in personal moral behavior as well. So it goes beyond just the society, also to the moral behavior of each individual. Torah says what you can eat and what you can't eat, right? Even if it doesn't affect anybody else. Torah says you may not eat this, but you may eat that. Right? So Torah goes beyond just protecting the civil, civil society. It goes
meaning in this context where it can step in, and override.
The parallel in civil law would be where it affects society, but Torah would go beyond that and say it affects your moral behavior too, right? Because Torah talks about your private matters also, whether you can eat something or not eat something, even if it's affecting nobody but yourself. Torah's in there too, right? So Torah goes more than civil law, but still the point is made.
Yeah.
Very beautiful to watch you both. It's like arguments that would have taken place in Pumbedita during the creation of the Babylonian Talmud. You know, the way back and forth, but very beautiful. And yes, it applies in the same way as Yehoshua, and you're just saying it. It's absolutely magnificent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, this is why we're still here, right? I have a friend.
It's so eternal. It's so eternal.
I have a friend who's my friend's father says this joke. He's a shliach in South America, and he says that. I'm gonna mess it up. But the bottom line is that a boat drowns with a bunch of people on it. A boat sinks, and there's two survivors. The two yiddles, the two Jews, survive, and they ask them at the end, "How'd you guys survive?" He says, "No idea. Well, we were just arguing about why the boat sunk, and we're arguing like this the whole time. That we stayed alive all the way to the end, because the Jews are arguing with their hands and the whole thing." So he would say this joke is, as long as Jews are arguing about what Hashem wants and what the Torah is, we're going to be around for a very long time.
Yeah, fun.
Very true. So that's why it's so eternal. It's magnificent.
Okay, wonderful day and a good Ner Shabbos
Yeah,
evening.
Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom. All the very best to you. God bless you, Rabbi, and all the very best to you, Yehoshua, and all of you.
Yeah, wonderful
bless
day.
you.
God bless. Thank you so much, Rabbi. It was a beautiful week. Should go from strength to strength.
Right, thank you. Good Shabbos.